March 22, 1945, 2200 hours. The headquarters of the United States Third Army sits in the German town of Nierstein, barely 3 miles from the western bank of the Rhine. Outside, the night is cold. Frost clings to the skeletal trees. Inside, a single figure stands hunched over a map table, tracing the blue line that has haunted Allied commanders for 4 years. The Rhine rivers. 300 yards of black water, swift current, the final natural barrier protecting the German heartland. For Adolf Hitler, it represents the last hope. For Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, it represents the greatest amphibious river crossing in military history, a meticulously planned operation requiring 250,000 troops, 5,500 artillery pieces, and 2 full airborne divisions. For Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower, it represents the careful, methodical conclusion to a war that has already cost too much blood. But for the man standing over that map, pearl-handled revolvers gleaming at his hips, 4 silver stars catching the lamplight, the Rhine represents something else entirely. An insult. General George Smith Patton, Jr., traces his finger across the river at a town called Oppenheim. His jaw tightens, his eyes narrow. Somewhere behind him, a staff officer clears his throat nervously. "Sir, there's been no authorization from SHIEF." "I didn't ask for authorization," Patton interrupts. His voice is quiet, dangerous. "I asked for boats." The officer swallows. "The boats are ready, sir." Patton straightens. For a moment, he stares at the map in silence. Then he speaks, almost to himself. "Montgomery thinks he needs 100,000 men and 2 weeks of bombardment to cross a river. I'll do it tonight with a division and not a single artillery shell." He turns to face his staff. "And I'll do it before anyone in the world knows we've moved." This is the story of how George Patton crossed the Rhine before any other Allied commander, how he did it without permission, without fanfare, without a single shot fired in preparation, and how that single act of audacious defiance broke the back of German resistance faster than any bombing campaign or armored offensive ever could. This is the story of the silent crossing. Section 1: The Architect and the Pirate. To understand what happened on the night of March 22, 1945, you must first understand 2 men who could not have been more different. Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery was the hero of El Alamein, the methodical British commander who had chased Rommel across North Africa. He believed in overwhelming force, meticulous planning. He never attacked until he was absolutely certain of victory. His approach to crossing the Rhine, codenamed Operation Plunder, was the largest single military operation since D-Day. The numbers were staggering. 4,000 artillery pieces would pound the eastern bank for hours before the first soldier touched water. 2 airborne divisions, the British 6th and the American 17th, would drop behind German lines. 29 divisions would participate. The Royal Navy would bring landing craft up the river. Smokescreens would cover miles of riverfront. Engineers had stockpiled enough bridging equipment to span the Rhine in 6 different locations. Montgomery had set his crossing for March 24. The world's press was invited. Winston Churchill himself planned to attend. George Patton read the reports on Operation Plunder and felt physically ill. "God damn it," he muttered to his chief of staff, Major General Hobart Gay. "Monty's going to turn this into a circus. 2 weeks of preparation, another week of execution. The war will be over before he's done congratulating himself." Patton paced his headquarters like a caged tiger. He had spent the last month racing across Germany at impossible speed. His Third Army had liberated the Saar, crushed the Wehrmacht's defenses in the Palatinate, taken over 100,000 prisoners, and now he sat idle, waiting for Montgomery to mount his spectacular show. "There has to be another way," he said. His intelligence officers studied the German defenses along the Rhine. What they found was remarkable. At Oppenheim, south of Mainz, the German line was thin, just a few battalions of exhausted infantry, no major fortifications, no prepared artillery positions. The Wehrmacht had concentrated its remaining strength further north, expecting Montgomery's massive assault. They had assumed, correctly, that no Allied commander would attempt a major river crossing without months of preparation. No Allied commander except one. "How many boats do we have?" Patton asked. "Enough for 2 battalions, sir. Maybe 3. "Artillery support." We could bring up the corps artillery, but it would take. No, Patton shook his head. No artillery, no bombardment, no warning of any kind. His staff exchanged glances. Sir, standard doctrine requires. I don't give a damn about standard doctrine. Patton's voice rose. Doctrine is what the enemy expects. We give them what they don't expect. He jabbed his finger at the map. The 5th Infantry Division crosses at Oppenheim. Tonight, in silence. If we can get a battalion across before the Germans know what's happening, we can establish a bridgehead before they can react. And once we're across, he paused, a grim smile spreading across his face, we don't stop until we reach Berlin. Section 2, The Order. March 22, 1945, 1400 hours. The command post of the 5th Infantry Division near Neerstein. Major General S. Leroy Irwin studied the order in his hands. Then he read it again. Then he looked up at the 3rd Army liaison officer standing before him. He wants us to cross tonight. Yes, sir. Without artillery preparation. Yes, sir. Without air cover. It's a night crossing, sir. No air assets available. Irwin set down the paper. His division had been fighting continuously for weeks. They were tired, under strength, and now Patton wanted them to attempt one of the most dangerous operations in military warfare with nothing but assault boats and personal weapons. Does SHIEF know about this? The liaison officer shifted uncomfortably. General Patton feels it's best to inform SHIEF after the crossing is complete. Irwin stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to laugh. That magnificent bastard, he said quietly. He turned to his regimental commanders. Gentlemen, we're crossing the Rhine tonight. Boats launch at 2200 hours. No artillery, no advance warning. Complete radio silence until we're established on the far bank. Colonel Paul Black of the 11th Infantry Regiment spoke first. What about German defenses? Intelligence suggests they're thin, but we won't know for certain until we're in the water. And if intelligence is wrong? Irwin met his gaze. Then we'll find out the hard way. But I know Patton. If he says we can do this, we can do this. He hasn't been wrong yet. By 1800 hours, assault boats were being trucked forward under strict blackout conditions. No headlights, no radio traffic. Soldiers blackened their faces and taped down anything that might rattle or reflect light. Officers synchronized watches. At 2100 hours, the first elements of the 11th Infantry Regiment reached the riverbank. They crouched in the darkness, staring across the black water at the distant shore. No sound came from the German side, no searchlights, no artillery flashes, nothing. The Rhine was quiet. Section 3, Into the Dark Asterisk. 2200 hours, the first wave launches. Soldiers of Company K, 11th Infantry Regiment, push their assault boats into the current. Paddles dip into the water with barely a ripple. The night is moonless, cold. The only sound is the soft lapping of the river against wooden hulls. Private First Class Robert Hansen grips his M1 Garand and tries not to think about what waits on the opposite shore. The Rhine current is stronger than expected. His boat drifts downstream. He can see nothing ahead but darkness. Somewhere to his left, a boat capsizes, muffled splashing. A strangled curse quickly silenced. They keep moving. 3 minutes pass, 4, 5. Then Hansen feels the boat scrape against gravel. Eastern shore, German soil. He's across. The soldiers scramble out, weapons ready, hearts pounding. They fan out across the beach, expecting at any moment to be met with machine gun fire, mortar rounds, the shriek of artillery. Nothing comes. They advance inland, 200 yards, 500, a kilometer. Still nothing. At 22:30 hours, Colonel Black receives the first radio transmission since the crossing began. 3 words crackle through the static. We're across unopposed. Section 4, The Secret Spreads. By midnight, 2 full battalions of the 11th Infantry Regiment are on the eastern bank of the Rhine. Engineers begin ferrying heavy equipment across, machine guns, mortars, anti-tank weapons. At 1:30 hours, the first German patrol stumbles into American positions. A brief firefight erupts. 3 Germans killed, 2 captured, the rest flee into the darkness. The survivors reach the German command post at Gross-Gerau 30 minutes later. They bring news that sends shock waves through the Wehrmacht chain of command. The Americans have crossed the Rhine. Not at the heavily fortified positions in the north, not with the massive force everyone expected, but here, in the south, where no one was watching. At 300 hours, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commander of all German forces on the Western Front, receives the report in his headquarters at Bad Nauheim. He reads it twice, then he reads it a third time. "This is impossible," he says quietly. His operations officer shakes his head. "The reports are confirmed, Herr Feldmarschall. American infantry, at least battalion strength, possibly more. No artillery bombardment preceded the attack. No aircraft, they simply appeared." Kesselring stares at the map on his wall. For months, German strategic planning had revolved around the Rhine. It was supposed to be Germany's natural shield, the river that would buy time for new weapons, new divisions, new hope. And now it was gone. "Which American unit?" he asks. "Third Army, Herr Feldmarschall, Patton." Kesselring closes his eyes. Of course it was Patton. Section 5, The Tiger's Teeth. March 23, 1945, dawn. George Patton stands on the western bank of the Rhine at Oppenheim, binoculars raised to his eyes. On the far shore, he can see the American flag flying over captured German positions. Engineers are working furiously to construct a pontoon bridge. Assault boats continue ferrying troops and equipment across the river. 12 hours, that's all it took. 12 hours to accomplish what Montgomery was spending months preparing for. Major General Manton Eddy, commanding XII Corps, approaches with a report. "Sir, we have 6 infantry battalions across. 2 tank battalions are crossing now on the ferries. Resistance remains light. We've taken over 1,000 prisoners." Patton lowers his binoculars. A slow smile spreads across his face. "Casualties?" "Minimal, sir. 8 killed, 20 wounded." 8 killed to cross the Rhine, the last barrier protecting Nazi Germany. Patton had lost 8 men. He thinks of Montgomery's plan, the thousands of artillery shells, the airborne drops, the weeks of preparation, the inevitable heavy losses. 8 men. "Get me a line to General Bradley," Patton says. 20 minutes later, he is on the phone with Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, commander of the 12th Army Group. "Brad, this is Patton. For God's sake, tell the world we're across. I want the world to know that 3rd Army made it before Monty starts his operation. We knocked down the door for him." There is a pause on the other end of the line. "George, does SHIEF know about this?" "They do now." Another pause, then despite himself, Bradley laughs. "You magnificent son of a bitch, you really did it." "Damn right I did, and Brad," Patton's voice drops, "don't let those British bastards steal the credit. We crossed the Rhine first. Make sure everyone knows it." Section 6, The Race. The news reaches SHAEF headquarters at Reims within the hour. Eisenhower's first reaction is disbelief, then irritation, then, grudgingly, admiration. Montgomery's reaction is considerably less gracious. When word reaches 21st Army Group headquarters that Patton has already established a bridgehead across the Rhine, Field Marshal Montgomery reportedly goes silent for a full minute before speaking. "How many casualties?" he finally asks. 8 killed, sir." Montgomery says nothing. His massive Operation Plunder is scheduled to begin in less than 24 hours. Thousands of aircraft are standing by. Hundreds of thousands of troops are in position. The largest river-crossing operation in history is about to commence. And George Patton has beaten him across with a handful of assault boats and a single infantry division. Back at Oppenheim, Patton isn't waiting for acknowledgement. He's already pushing his forces east. "Don't stop," he tells his commanders. "Don't stop for anything. If you run out of fuel, siphon it from captured vehicles. If you run out of ammunition, use captured ammunition. Just keep moving." The 4th Armored Division crosses the Rhine behind the infantry, then the 6th Armored, then the 11th. Tank after tank rolls across the pontoon bridge, fanning out across the German countryside. German resistance is crumbling. Units that were supposed to defend the Rhine have been caught completely off guard. Many surrender without a fight. Others flee east, abandoning equipment, abandoning positions, abandoning hope. 20 miles the first day, 30 the second, 40 the third. Patton's Third Army is tearing the heart out of Germany. Section 7, the Piss. March 24, 1945. The pontoon bridge at Oppenheim is complete. Patton walks to the center of the structure, stops, and stares down at the rushing water below. Reporters and photographers cluster nearby, sensing something historic is about to happen. Patton unzips his fly. For the next 30 seconds, the commanding general of the United States Third Army urinates into the Rhine River while cameras flash and soldiers cheer. When he finishes, he turns to the assembled press corps with a wolfish grin. "I've been waiting a long time to do that," he announces. "I didn't even piss this morning so I could save it for the Jerry's." He walks the rest of the way across the bridge, stopping at the eastern bank to kneel down and scoop up a handful of German soil. "Thus William the Conqueror," he says grandly, referring to the Norman Duke who famously stumbled upon landing in England and declared he was embracing his new kingdom. It is pure theater, pure Patton, and it cements the moment in history. That same day, Montgomery's Operation Plunder begins. The artillery barrage lasts 4 hours. 2,000 Allied aircraft fill the sky. 17,000 airborne troops descend in the largest single-day airborne operation of the war. It is spectacular, it is overwhelming, and it is 2 days late. Section 8, the collapse. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler receives the reports with mounting fury. The Rhine, the great river barrier that was supposed to halt the Allied advance, has been breached in multiple locations. American tanks are already racing toward Frankfurt. British forces are crossing in the north. The elaborate defensive plans that German generals had spent months developing are worthless. Hitler demands counterattacks, reserves that don't exist, divisions that have already been destroyed. Field Marshal Kesselring tries to explain the situation. Mein Führer, Patton's crossing caught us completely by surprise. He used no conventional preparation, no bombardment. He simply appeared on our side of the river before we knew he was coming. By the time we could react, he had already established a bridgehead too strong to eliminate. "Then you should have anticipated this," Hitler screams. "You should have known." But how could they have known? Every military textbook, every tactical manual, every principle of modern warfare said that a major river crossing required extensive preparation. Artillery, air support, engineer assets, smoke screens. The very idea of crossing the Rhine in silence, with nothing but assault boats and infantry rifles, was so contrary to doctrine that no German commander had seriously considered it. That was Patton's genius, not just his audacity, but his understanding that the enemy's greatest weakness was his assumptions. Section 9, the Telegram. March 25, 1945. Patton's headquarters, now established on the eastern bank of the Rhine. A telegram arrives from General Eisenhower. Patton opens it with some trepidation, expecting a reprimand for acting without authorization. Instead, he finds a single sentence. "Congratulations on a brilliant tactical achievement." Patton sets down the telegram and laughs out loud. "Ike's coming around," he tells his staff. "Even he can't argue with success." But the true measure of success isn't found in congratulatory messages. It's found in the German collapse that follows. Within a week, Patton's Third Army has advanced over 100 miles into Germany. Frankfurt falls, then Kassel, then Weimar. German armies that had fought tenaciously for every inch of ground in France and Belgium simply dissolve before the American advance. The psychological impact of the Rhine crossing cannot be overstated. For German soldiers, the river had been a symbol of hope, the last defensive barrier that might halt the Allied onslaught. When Patton crossed it so easily, so effortlessly, that hope evaporated. They began surrendering in droves. Entire divisions gave up without firing a shot. the myth of Fortress Germany died on the banks of the Rhine. Section 10. The Reckoning. April 1945. Germany is dying. Patton's Third Army races east, liberating concentration camps, capturing cities, accepting surrenders by the tens of thousands. The war that seemed endless just months ago is clearly in its final weeks. At his headquarters, Patton receives reports of another kind of resistance, not from German soldiers but from Allied politics. Supply lines are stretched thin, gasoline is rationed, orders come from SHAEF to slow the advance, consolidate positions, wait for other armies to catch up. Patton ignores them all. "We didn't cross the Rhine to stop," he tells Bradley. "We crossed it to end this war. Give me fuel and I'll be in Berlin before the Russians." But Berlin is not to be his. Political decisions made far above Patton's pay grade have already determined that the Soviets will take the German capital. Patton's Third Army is directed south, toward Austria and Czechoslovakia. He obeys reluctantly, bitterly. But nothing can take away what he accomplished at Oppenheim. In a single night, with a single division, George Patton proved that the Rhine could be crossed without the massive preparations that conventional wisdom demanded. He proved that audacity could succeed where caution would have failed. He proved that the greatest weapon in warfare is not firepower or numbers, but the willingness to do what the enemy believes impossible. Section 11. Historical Verdict ***. In the years that followed, military historians would debate the significance of Patton's Rhine crossing. Some argued that it was merely a sideshow, that Montgomery's Operation Plunder, with its overwhelming force, would have succeeded regardless. Others pointed out that the German defenses were already collapsing, that Patton simply took advantage of an enemy in disarray. But these arguments miss the essential point. General Omar Bradley, writing in his memoirs, put it simply: George did at Oppenheim what no one else would have dared to try. He crossed a major river obstacle without artillery, without air cover, without anything except guts and assault boats. And he did it because he understood something the rest of us had forgotten, that in war, surprise is worth 100 divisions. Field Marshal Kesselring, interrogated after the war, was equally blunt. Patton was the most aggressive and dangerous opponent we faced. His crossing of the Rhine at Oppenheim was a tactical masterpiece. We had prepared for the British assault in the north. We had prepared for every conventional approach. We had not prepared for a general who rejected every rule of warfare we thought we understood. The numbers tell their own story. Montgomery's Operation Plunder, despite its massive scale, achieved no faster rate of advance than Patton's silent crossing. The casualties were far higher. The strategic result was identical. Patton crossed the Rhine with 8 men killed. Montgomery's crossing cost thousands. Sometimes, the history books conclude, the simplest approach is the most devastating. Sometimes, a general who ignores doctrine achieves more than an army that follows it. The Rhine still flows through Germany today, past the quiet town of Oppenheim, where, on a cold March night in 1945, American soldiers paddled across its dark waters in wooden boats. There is a small monument there now, a plaque commemorating the crossing. Tourists occasionally stop to read it. Most don't fully understand what they're looking at. But those who study military history know. They know that on this spot, George Patton proved something that Field Marshal Montgomery, with all his resources and all his planning, could never accept. Something that the German High Command, with all their fortifications and all their doctrine, could never anticipate. The Rhine was not a fortress, it was just a river. And sometimes, all it takes to change history is a man willing to cross it before anyone thinks he should. No artillery, no airborne, no announcement. Just soldiers and boats in the dark.